I'm here with Mitch Gray. Now, Mitch, you know me. We've known each other for quite some time. We've been friends, and you've been my mentor. And now I'm doing something very specific. I have a campaign, and I want to raise $1 million. Now, you know me. I'm going to do something special and spectacular. My effort to uh, hike across the Appalachian Trail with a small group of people is requiring a lot of effort, money, and time. But I'm also supporting those people who are providing mental health services and suicide prevention to those in need. Right now, I'm collecting stories from people who have been impacted by others that they know, either through family or friends, who have died by suicide. I would love to hear your story.
Yeah, first of all, Keith, thank you for your journey and for kind of picking up this mantle. The more of us that do pick up this mantle of awareness and education, obviously the more impact we can have. And so I will begin my story with, from what I can recall, the first time I was actually on the support end of a potential suicide situation. And so the story goes like this. It was when I was working as a pastor, and I was probably 26 years old, 25, 26, somewhere in there, regardless, young. Uh, had never really dealt with this. And, the interesting thing about being a pastor, a minister, a priest, is that you go through school and they teach you all things within their belief system regarding the Bible. What you end up becoming is a marital counselor, a therapist, a life coach, a spirit. You kind of take on all of these roles that, quite frankly, you're just flat out not equipped with knowledge or expertise. And so regardless, you find yourself in situations. And I found myself in a situation one early morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. It was, we still had a landline phone. This is in the early 2000s. And my phone rings and I pick it up. And it is a man who his family attended the church that I was pastoring. I had maybe met this person once or twice. I don't remember in person. Uh, but he needed help badly. And the only person he knew to call was me. And so I'm finding myself at 2 o'clock in the morning in my house, walking around in the dark because my kids were really small at the time. So I didn't want to wake them up. And I am talking to a man who is extremely strung out on very hard drugs and is in a position, I won't get into detail, but he's in a position to take his own life. And so I found myself, on the other end of the phone. It's one thing to be in person, which I've found myself in since then, situations where I'm in person in that. That's quite different than being on the other end of the phone.
Right.
And so in that moment, fortunately, the moral of the story there is he made the decision to not. We were able to get him some real help, urgent help, and professional help. I haven't talked to that family in a very, very long time, but I hope things are still on the up and up. So I'm very grateful for that. But what I also learned in that moment is a ton of respect for emergency operators, 911, EMTs, because that is an incredibly difficult scenario to be in, where you are just doing your best to send as much love verbally, spiritually, through that phone line as best as possible, support without showing much emotional response. Uh, and that leads me to, as I'm sure over your journey, the next quite a few months to raise awareness. Uh, it leads me to the idea that the conversation that does need to change around mental health and suicide is not that you have to have the right words, but that you're just present. In fact, right now, kind of one of my goals on social media is to really begin doing much of the same and teaching people how do you really support those in your circle who may be struggling with this. And I think so oftentimes as humans, we default to saying something when we don't know even what to say. And that's often the greatest mistake. It's often best to just be silent and to simply validate and to simply be. And I learned that. I'm telling this story because fortunately, this did not end in a death, but it did teach me a great lesson, both for myself, the things I struggle with mental disorders, and in helping and supporting others as best I can. Is that there's nothing that can replace the human presence, not even words, and that's something. I also had a young man that again I was it was this was still in my pastoring days. This was probably in the early 2010s ish. We actually took over an old bar nightclub and started a church there. And it grew from 8 or 10 of us to like 80 in about 2 months. I mean, it was pretty crazy how things happened. The interesting thing about that dynamic was the people we were attracting were the people that used to go to the bar or were still wanting to go to the bar. And they would walk in on our Saturday night service realizing this isn't the nightclub anymore. And what's interesting is most of the time they would stay. And so through all of that, I began mentoring a young man who had a history of rampant drug use from opioids to hard drugs, multiple self-harm situations, multiple suicide attempts. I actually hired him over time. I gave him a car at one point just to help him hopefully find some goodness in life. And over the years, we lost track of each other. And unfortunately, this has been quite a few years ago, but I was in the grocery store locally and I ran into a guy that used to be one of his close friends. And he was like, hey, did you hear about so and so? And I was like, no, I haven't heard from him in years. And he's like, well, he passed away last year by suicide. And that's a really bad news situation in general. It's really a jagged pill to swallow when you're in the middle of a grocery store and you're just like, you're in a
You weren't
public
prepared for
place.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, and so, um, I've had unfortunately had multiple of those types of stories, and some of those have been kind of mentor mentee situations. And sometimes, again, because of the work I've done in the past as a life coach and a pastor and a mentor, there's just something about this human experience where if you're around long enough, you are going to be impacted by suicide, mental health, etc. It's an incredibly unfortunate experience in this human life that we live. Very recently, a peer of mine lost their partner to suicide. Very unexpected. They were actually away on vacation with their family. Partner had to stay home for various reasons. And while said partner was on vacation, got the call and received the news that of what happened. And as someone who deals with mental health disorders, quite frankly, as someone who has had a suicide attempt personally, who still battles suicide ideation, etc. I was talking to a friend one time, and he had lost a friend and actually a family member. And he made the statement. He said, "Mitch, I just don't get it. I just don't understand what would cause someone to make that decision." By the way, for your watchers, that's the wrong thing to say, even if it's the truth, because what that tells those of us who do battle these shadows and demons is it tells us immediately that you're not a safe person for us to talk to and connect with.
Hmm.
That you're saying, I don't get it, and it's hard for me to understand, then how in the world are you ever going to be supportive in a moment? And so, what I would encourage people with as we're raising awareness and telling these stories, to move yourself away from, I don't get it. That may be a truth, and that's okay. But move away from, I don't get it, and move closer to your feelings are valid. Because I don't have to get it. I don't have to get it to validate your feelings. Your feelings are valid. It's frustrating. How can I be present for you? And when you can move closer to that conversation, then it allows someone like myself I know, you've had your own demons to battle as well. It then allows us to go, oh, you might be a safe place that I can actually be very vulnerable, because some of these conversations are ugly and they come from some of the most unsuspecting people. For my journey, most of the time when I share some of my story, people are like, I see you walking around, I see you speaking. I would have never guessed. And isn't that the trick, that we never guess and we don't know? And so why dance in the unsuspected when we can just simply dance in the validation? And so those are a few of my stories. Thank you to everyone watching. I hope you support Keith's journey. I appreciate your partnership, my friend and brother, because we are making a difference. And as long as we impact one life, we've impacted eternity. Um,
Mitch, thank you. Thank you so much.